Hey everyone, welcome to the Zone Defense Podcast. Be sure to follow us on Spotify at Zone Defense Podcast, Twitter at Zone Defense Pod, and subscribe to our YouTube channel at Zone Defense Podcast. We have Roman on the show today. How's it going, man?
I'm good, Chris. How are you?
I'm doing well, man. I'm excited to break down the NFC South today. It's been a while since we've done one of these because we were waiting kind of for the opt out period, but it seems like for the most part it's starting to kind of die down a little bit. We had that big day with a bunch of different moves, and the really big news lately was the Damian Williams, him dropping out of the league for the year. You know, that was really the last big move. That was a couple days ago. So we're gonna get into this division today because we don't expect too many more big moves. How are you feeling about this division this year?
I definitely think it could be one of the best divisions in football, especially obviously with the Bucs getting Tom Brady, the GOAT, obviously. So, and I think the Falcons can have a bounce back season. We'll get into that a little bit, but I think it's a very underrated division, and it could be probably one of the best in football.
Yeah, I totally agree on that. I think this is a team or a division that has a lot of talent and a lot of there's gonna be a lot of offense. All four of these teams should be in the upper half of the league in terms of scoring and yards and stuff. And they all have a lot. There's a lot of good quarterbacks in this division as well that I'm excited to talk about. So let's jump into our first team here. It's the Atlanta Falcons. You know, they had a kind of a disappointing year last year, 7-9. They got off to a really slow start last year, and coach was about to get fired, I believe, and then they kind of got into a hot streak at the end of the year. I believe they went either 5 or 6-1 to end the year. So he kind of saved his job for one more year, I think. So let's go into the additions here. Dante Fowler Jr., the big addition. They signed him to a big contract, so he needs to perform for them to be good. Hayden Hurst, kind of the replacement for Austin Hooper, who left. Todd Gurley, which interested to see what he can do. Quan Treadwell, Deion Buchanan, John Hawkins. I mean, the other smaller additions to the team. They lost out on Desmond Trufant to Detroit. Devontae Freeman's an unrestricted free agent right now. Vic Beasley, basically the Dante Fowler replacement right there. Devon J. Campbell, Austin Hooper, Adrian Claiborne for the subtractions here. And the big moves they made in the draft were picking at 16. They got AJ Terrell, really solid corner out of Clemson. Maybe a little bit of a reach there, but we'll talk about him a little bit. And then Marlon Davidson, defensive end from Auburn, a pretty talented player as well. What do you want to get into first about the Falcons team?
I think if I recall correctly, the Falcons have the most vacated targets from last season, obviously losing out on Hooper and Freeman. So, and we talked about this when we did our mock draft. We both liked Hayden Hurst a lot, and I feel like he'll definitely step into that role and definitely get a lot of targets. And I think Calvin Ridley will also, step into the wide receiver two role that we've been waiting to see him in so long. He'll finally, I think, maybe break out. They don't have Sanu anymore. They don't have Hooper, and I think the offense will be rocking and rolling this year. What do you think?
Yeah, I totally agree here. I think Matt Ryan's due for a big season. He was a little disappointing last year. It's mostly about the touchdowns with him, man. When this offense is going really well and he's a borderline MVP candidate, it's when he's throwing a lot of touchdown passes in the red zone, and that's been his struggle for the last couple of seasons. Really, really struggling down. He's awesome inside the 20s, one of the better quarterbacks in the league. And my knock on him always, and why I don't think he's an elite quarterback or ever has been, is that he just really struggles in the red zone to score touchdowns. When it really matters most, he seems to break down. He throws a lot of red zone interceptions. So if he can turn that around a little bit this year, I think him and the offense could be really good and basically carry this team to a potential playoff berth, which I'll break them down a little bit later. But I'm a little bit higher than the Falcons than I am usually. I think they're going to be pretty good this year. I think they're due for a clean bill of health on defense as well. The defense has a lot of talent on it. It's just all about the fact that they just continue to get injured every single season. It's ridiculous how many injuries. That Deion Jones just seems their most talented defensive player. Just seems like he cannot stay on the field, and that's always big for them. But adding Dante Fowler Jr. in the free agent period, he's a very talented player. Maybe they overpaid a little bit for him, but Fowler can get the job done as an edge rusher. He's one of the more talented pass rushers in the league. So I'm thinking that the defense could be a little bit better as well. I don't know how you feel about them.
I think the defense will be one of the hurting points. If they're going to struggle this year, it'll most likely come from the defense. I think they lost a lot of weapons in Trufant and Beasley, and like you said, there's always that one key injury that happens so early on in the season, and it really hurts them. So if they're gonna have a good season, they need to have their defense step up. But that's still waiting to be seen.
Yeah, that's very true. They haven't had a very good defense, and the loss of Trufant, while I don't think he's as good as he used to be, I don't think he's a number one anymore. He's still a pretty talented corner, probably top 40, 50 corner in the league. So nothing. He's definitely a starting caliber player, but they kind of replaced him with AJ Terrell, which I do like Terrell, just maybe not at the 16th pick. I think maybe that was a little bit of a reach for them. They did need a corner bad, so I understand it. But I think there was a couple better corners left on the board that they could have went with.
Yeah, they really hit all those defensive points in the draft. I think, they only drafted defense, it looks like.
Yeah,
So,
Marlon
is that
Davidson should help out with a little bit of the defensive end depth at least.
yes, Hennessy was their only offensive pick, but besides that, they went all defense and then a punter at the end. They should all step in right away and get a lot of work.
Yeah, my next point I want to bring up is the addition of Todd Gurley. With not really any running backs behind him, I think Gurley could have a really nice season for the Falcons team. I think he's still got some talent left. It's just all about the arthritic knee with him. It's been a lingering problem, but he really hasn't missed that many games. And last year, while he wasn't insanely efficient or really good, he had a lot of touchdowns, which he's one of the best red zone backs in the league. He just is a beast inside the five. He just gets so many of those goal line touchdowns, and that was no exception last year. It was all about the fact that they just really didn't give him any passing work. But I think when you have so many vacated targets, a lot of them go to the running back position, and I don't really know, besides maybe Brian Hill, who has a little bit of talent. Todd Gurley is really the only running back that has legitimate star potential in this offense, in my opinion. So I think he could have a bounce back season. I don't know how you feel about Gurley, but
Yeah, I definitely think he'll be featured quite a bit. He's only on a 1-year deal, so I really think that Falcons are just going to run him into the ground, and if he gets hurt, then it's not going to affect them too much. They can just cut him right then and there, or just not re-sign him after the season ends. It'll be a big free agency period for running backs, so they can always just wait this year out and then sign someone later. But I think Gurley will have a good season. Probably not maybe the best season compared to his previous ones, but he definitely has a lot to do in the offense, and I think he'll be involved, which makes him, quite a solid pick in fantasy. But I'm going to refer back to our draft that we did. We both were kind of not as high on him as maybe other people are. We just kind of we can pick him, but we don't really feel good about it. But he'll
yeah.
definitely get the work.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel about Gurley as well. I think he's going to get a lot of work. I think sometimes Falcon fans are going to be happy with what he's doing on the field just because he's so good in the red zone. And that's another thing that I didn't even really think of is that how bad Matt Ryan is in the red zone. Gurley's going to help out with that because he's a very efficient back inside the 10-yard line. So that might help him out, open up the passing game a little bit inside the 20, which, like I said, has really struggled. Hayden Hurst also might be a nice addition. I actually think he's more talented than Austin Hooper personally. I think Hooper's a little bit overrated. Still a good tight end, but I really like Hayden Hurst. I mean, he was a first-round pick for a reason. This guy's got a lot of talent, and he just unfortunately ran into the Mark Andrews problem, and he's one of the elite tight ends in this league. I don't think Hurst is quite that guy, but I think he's definitely a top tight end or top 10 tight end talent, in my opinion. I don't know how you feel about Hurst, but I think he's going to get a lot of work. I think he's going to get the ball. He's not exactly an athletic monster, but I think he's athletic enough to get some down the field targets, eat up some of this passing work. Like we said, a lot of vacated targets. Hooper was a big part of that. Got the ball out. I think Hurst is going to step into that role and basically be Hooper, maybe even a little bit better. I think that's a possibility for him in this offense.
Yeah, he never really quite shined in Baltimore, but that's because there was a big tight end room. And I think Hayden Hurst has the opportunity to be the Mark Andrews of 2020. He can definitely break out and help the Falcons, push for the playoffs.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more here. And another thing I kind of want to get into before we move on to the fantasy picks is we don't really give offensive lines a lot of love in some of these, and the Falcons do have a pretty good offensive line. We can't forget about that. Alex Mack, the center, and Jake Matthews, the tackler, are two of the better players at their respective positions. They have a lot of solid guys right around them too. Those are just the two big names I like to address. And they added Matt Hennessy to that group. He's going to back up. He's going to back up Alex Mack. So I
Yeah,
think the offensive line is due for a big year as well. I think this offense is going to be top 7 in the league. I really think there's no way they don't. They have all the talent, like we said. Julio Jones, Calvin Ridley. I think that's one of the best receiving duos, and they may be the best. So I think Ridley hasn't even really broken out yet, and I think he's almost as good as some of these elite names that we've talked about in previous episodes in terms of the receiver position. But I think this offense is due for a top 7 performance. Do you think they'll be able to finish that high or no?
they definitely have the opportunity to. I just want to touch on the offensive line real quick. They spent 2 first-round picks last season on offensive linemen, and Chris Lindstrom and Eric McCoy. So
Right.
they're definitely stacking on the offensive line, and if all things are rolling, they could definitely compete in the division. Obviously, it'll be really tough because of the other teams that are in there. Uh, the third wild card spot, maybe that opens opportunity for them, but it's really been a couple down years since their Super Bowl appearance, and they need Matt Ryan to step up big time. I think he has the opportunity to.
Yeah, and like I said, Matt Ryan, not my favorite quarterback in the league. I think he's very solid, but not the most talented or best quarterback. But I think he has the potential to get the job done this year. And I think the season really lies on Matt Ryan, whether or not he can really get it done in the red zone. And the fact that if Deion Jones can stay healthy, this defense is considerably better than they are without him. Because I think Deion Jones is one of the better linebackers in the league. I don't think he gets enough love because he gets injured so often, man. I hate it because I think he's a really talented linebacker. I think he's like I said, one of the better middle linebackers in the league. He's great in coverage, and he really clogs up a lot of the holes that this defense, a lot of those weaknesses at different positions that this defense has. Do you think he can stay healthy for a full season, or is it just he's going to give you 7 or 8 games and then just get injured again?
I really doubt he'll make it a full 16 season, but if he does, I think that will be very helpful to that defense. And the same with Gurley. I don't think you're going to expect a full 16 games out of either one of them, but best case scenario, you can get more than half of a season and only miss a couple of games and still compete by the end of the year, and not just tank for a draft pick.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm hoping Deion Jones can stay healthy, man. I can dream on that. He's really one of my favorite defensive players, and I'm sad we haven't really been able to see him really unleash for a full season. But let's go ahead and get into our fantasy predictions. I'd like to hear. There's so many weapons in this offense, so I'd like to hear your take first.
I'm sure you'll go with Julio, but I'm going to go with a little more underrated one in Hayden Hurst. I'm sure we're both very high on this guy. Definitely a guy you can get very late in drafts, and you can just use him and plug him in any day of the week. And obviously, like you said, most vacated targets in the NFL. So definitely going to go to him. Dirk Cutter likes to utilize the tight ends. He'll definitely be utilized quite a bit and definitely perform, maybe end up with a top 10, top 5 tight end of the season.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more on Hayden Hurst. I think he's a locked and loaded top 10 tight end this year. I think he has the upside to finish as a tight end 3. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I think he has that within his range of possibilities just because of how many vacated targets they had, like we were talking about. But I don't really like to go with the obvious names like Julio. He's obviously like the wide receiver. He could be the wide receiver one. I want to go with the other receiver in this starting core. It's Calvin Ridley for me. I think he's getting slept on a lot in drafts as well. I think this is a guy that this is the reason why I like to go running back early. I really like Calvin Ridley's value in the 4th and 5th round. I think he could finish as a top 10 receiver this year. I think this is the year he breaks out. I know he's got the number 1 Julio Jones there, but don't forget about Chris Godwin last year breaking out with the clear number 1 Mike Evans there. Godwin, I mean they're not similar receivers, but they're very similar in terms of talent level. I think they're both very good number 2 receivers. And I think Calvin really takes that next step this year. I think he's a top 15 tight end or top 15 wide receiver for me, like no matter what. And I think he has the upside to finish as more. So I don't know how you feel about him, but I'm really high on his chances to be good this year.
Yeah, he's had a few good games in the past couple of seasons. I know there was a bunch of talk last season of him breaking out, but I think if there's any time to break out, it's now. And he's going around, where Amari Cooper, Robert Woods, G.D. Charker is going. I'm sure there are many people out there who would rather have Ridley out of all of those guys, but if he doesn't break out this season, then I don't really know what to tell you. It should be the prime opportunity for him.
Yeah, and he's had a little bit of tough luck with injuries, so you can't knock him too much for not breaking out yet. But he's had a couple pretty solid seasons. A lot of touchdowns. I know the yards haven't quite been what you wanted, but the touchdown numbers have been excellent. And this is a guy that can really help Matt Ryan. For some reason, he just doesn't like targeting Julio in the red zone, which I know Julio can get it done in there. He's one of the most talented. I think he's the best receiver in the league, personally, and a guy that still has a lot of juice left. But I think Ridley's the guy that he needs to target in the red zone to have a lot of success. I think Ridley's due for 10 touchdowns this year and over 1,000 yards. And if he gets those numbers, the 10 touchdowns is really going to help him set himself apart from guys like Robert Woods and DJ Chark, which I also like both of them as well. So if you're drafting any of these guys around there, it's really just kind of pick your favorite guy there. I was going to say pick your poison, but you like all these names, so you can't really say that either. But I really like all the 4th and 5th round receivers. So if he's there on the board, I would absolutely take my shot on him being more than he's been before.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that.
All right. So that kind of does it for the Falcons. Let's jump into the best team in this division. 13-3 New Orleans Saints. Another tough loss in the wild card round. Really stinks that they couldn't get it done. I mean, 13-3 and having to play a wild card round is just absolutely brutal, man. They just ran into a buzz. It was a very top heavy NFC last year, so they just kind of ran into a buzzsaw and lost to Minnesota yet again in the wild card round. So let's go into the moves. They didn't really add a whole lot. Emmanuel Sanders, the big wide receiver move for them, the big signing, kind of just putting him opposite of Michael Thomas. That's going to be big for them. They brought back Malcolm Jenkins, the corner slash safety. Pretty good player, but he's a little bit older now. Jameis Winston, the interesting signing at quarterback, and then Ty Montgomery, just some depth at running back. And they lost Teddy Bridgewater to Carolina, which is kind of where Winston filled in. AJ Klein, which is a bigger move than people are going to think as well, going to Buffalo. Eli Apple, Von Bell, both also gone. So the secondary has a couple holes in it. But they were able to draft Cesar Ruiz, which I actually really like the pick for Michigan. Even though I'm not a Michigan fan by any stretch of the imagination, Ruiz is a very talented center, and I cannot deny that. They also made a very good pick in Zach Bond, who seemed to be falling really far in the draft. I actually thought he was going to go in the back of the second. He dropped all the way to the basically like mid to late third. So, I mean, this is a guy that clearly has a lot of talent, just kind of fell in the draft. And then Adam Troutman, also an interesting signing from Dayton, kind of the backup to Jared Cook. So I'm kind of excited to see what he can do as well in his development in this league. On the Saints, do you think this is a team that got better in the offseason?
I don't really think they got a whole lot better. It's hard to really improve on 13-3. I definitely think they're still the team to beat, though, in the NFC. They definitely have competed and deserved to go to the Super Bowl, and they kind of got heartbroken 3 years in a row. So I think they added some good pieces, didn't really lose anything that significant. I know you didn't touch on Larry Warford. He was definitely one of the solid pieces that
Yeah,
got
he
it.
was.
They just couldn't have they didn't have the money to bring him back, and Warford actually opted out for the season, actually. So looks like no one will be able to pick him up, but um, they definitely didn't get a whole lot better. They didn't get worse, I don't think, and they're definitely still a team to contend for the Super Bowl this year. Absolutely.
Yeah, on the Saints, man, it's really tough to see that they've had such tough luck. They've had the Diggs catch, right after that they had the terrible pass interference call, and then they had the great snag, which was a kind of a questionable no call of pass interference on Kyle Rudolph last year. So 3 years in a row, they've had questionable calls from refs or just really just miracle plays in general. So this year, I think they have a chance to make a deep run as well. Adding Emmanuel Sanders, like I said, a bigger move than people are going to realize. And putting him across from Michael Thomas, as good as Michael Thomas has been, I really don't think just having him in the receiver core is enough for them to get back to the Super Bowl. I think they needed another weapon on the outside. And Sanders is also a fantastic route runner, just like Michael Thomas is. Both elite route runners. I mean, Sanders a little bit older now, so maybe not elite anymore, but he's still a very good route runner, and he has very good hands. So these are two receivers that are just going to catch a ton of passes. They're going to catch most targets thrown to them, and they're going to run really good routes for aging Drew Brees, which do you think he still has enough left? Because it seems like he's kind of slowed down a little bit towards the end of the season. Do you think he can kind of remain fresh and stay alive, and he still has some juice left?
I think this year he'll be able to remain fresh, knowing that this could very well be his last season. I know there's a lot of controversy, a lot of discussion between Brees and retirement in the offseason. He was supposed to get the start in the Pro Bowl and then got taken out. Maybe people thought it was his last game. Uh, People are thinking he can get a broadcasting job after when he retires. Definitely all that on the table. This could very well be his last season, and I think he's gonna try even harder to get a ring before he has to leave. Whether it ends
Yeah,
this season or next season, he's definitely 1 or 2 years away from retirement.
yeah. I think Breeze. This is going to be his last season because I think they're going to have a very good season. I don't know if they're going to get to the Super Bowl, but they're going to be close. I think they're getting to the NFC Championship at least this year. I think he's going to retire on a hot note. I think the thing with the Breeze is that I think he really needs a Super Bowl because I think without this, it kind of hurts his legacy a little bit. I think he needs that second ring. It's been so long since they've had one. They've had a lot of really good rosters and they've had some tough luck in the playoffs. But I think that's not the only thing. I think he's hasn't played up to par in my opinion. I think he's been a little bit sluggish, at least from the going in some of these playoff games. I think he's left a lot to be desired in the like later half of the season. He's got off to really good starts all the last 3 years and then kind of faltered in the second half, and then in the playoffs he's been kind of mediocre. So I think this is a big year for him to prove himself, and he's got the weapons to do it. They still have Alvin Kamara, who's going to be healthy this year off that high ankle sprain last year, and I really like his chances to bounce back as well. I think he's a great pass catcher. He's really going to help Drew Brees in that regard. They brought back, Latavius Murray's still there, another pretty talented back. They got Jared Cook. They have Taysom Hill too, which I'm excited to see how they unleash him as well this year. Not going to be super relevant for fantasy or anything. I'm not really concerned about him in that regard, but he's very good for this offense, and he provides a lot of different things because he can line up at the quarterback position, tight end, running back, wide receiver, special teams, defense. The guy can do it all. I mean, not to talk about Taysom Hill too much. I think he gets a lot of hype, but he definitely is good for the offense. So I think this is an offense that could. I think the offense definitely could improve. I don't know how you feel about that, but I'd like to get your opinion.
Yeah, it was definitely interesting in the offseason because they had a full quarterback room between Brees, Hill, and Bridgewater, and they knew that they couldn't bring back everyone, so they had to let Bridgewater go. But I think they got a nice backup in Jameis Winston. I think for him and where he's at in his career, I think the Saints are a perfect spot for him to maybe learn behind a legend and then maybe get another starting role down the line, or maybe take over for Brees when he's gone. And some were saying Hill could be a starting quarterback in this league. I don't know. I don't think we've seen enough from him as a starter to sustain a franchise, but the role that he's playing, I think it definitely works for him, whether it's on offense, defense, special teams. He's always going to be out there, always making plays. And I think Winston deserves to get a shot once Brees is done, whether in New Orleans or another place that needs him. But good quarterback room totally for the Saints.
Yeah, on Winston, I actually really hope that they when Drew Brees retires, he's still around because I think he could thrive in this offense. I really think learning under Sean Payton and Drew Brees this year could do wonders for his career. I think Winston's a very talented quarterback. While he hasn't put it all together, he's got the arm. He's got a little bit of athleticism out there. He's got a very accurate arm as well. I don't think he gets enough credit for that. It's just the decision making, man. He just really needs to. He really needs to work on the decision making. I think the Saints is just a perfect, absolutely a ideal situation for him to just learn for 1 year. And if he comes out next year and has an absolute monster year after Brees retires, I would not be surprised at all. But enough on him. I kind of want to talk about Cesar Ruiz, the center. He's just an excellent all-around center. I think he's going to do a really good job pass blocking for Drew Brees. And this stage of his career, Brees is not very mobile. I mean, he never really was. But Ruiz is going to be a big part of that offensive line, just keeping him protected. And this is a good offensive line, a lot of solid talent. Like we said, Larry Warford gone. But other than that, they're really solid. I think they're going to have a big year as well. And I think this defense doesn't get enough love. I think this is an excellent run defense. And adding Zach Bond to that room is definitely going to help. And then Malcolm Jenkins as well is going to help a little bit on the back end because I think their secondary leaves a lot to be desired. I know Marshawn Lattimore is a very, very solid shutdown corner. I like him a lot. But other than that, they really don't have a lot of talent on the back end. And they did lose Von Bell as well, which was probably their best safety. He's not great, but he's at least a decent safety. But adding Jenkins I think he's gonna add some leadership in the back, and he's still got some talent. So I'm excited. Do you think this secondary can hold up enough to make this defense pretty good again?
Yeah, I definitely think the Malcolm Jenkins signing really helped them a lot. I think losing Eli Apple wasn't that big of a loss, and he didn't really
No,
show
he
up.
stinks.
He didn't really show up at all in those games. Von Bell definitely another loss, but when you bring a guy like Jenkins, a proven leader, a well-spoken leader, I think that'll go and pair really nicely with Brees on the offense and give this team a couple of leaders on offense and defense.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think the AJ Klein loss is actually their biggest loss of the year because I think Klein is is excellent coverage guy, and that's why we're going to get into the AFC East in a couple episodes. But Klein is one of the he's one of the better coverage linebackers in the league. So Buffalo got kind of a steal there, in my opinion. I think that was another one of the better signings in the offseason. But on the offensive line, they still got Teron Armstead, Andrews Pete, Eric McCoy. Cesar Ruiz is actually, I forgot, he's actually going to play right guard. So
yeah, they can definitely move him all around the line. And I actually wanted to ask you this question. Obviously, the Ruiz pick obviously is going to help their line, but it was also kind of a surprise pick to me. I was hoping they would target a wide receiver or maybe thought they would get Jordan Love. So do you think Ruiz was the right pick, or do you think they could have gotten a wide receiver in the first round?
Well, on a team that doesn't have very many holes, I absolutely think this was the right pick because they added Emmanuel Sanders and they added Jameis Winston. They didn't really have a dire need in one of both of those. I think wide receiver they could have gone with one for the future, but I think they could draft one next year and be all right with it because that's also a pretty good wide receiver class. So if they end up with a decent pick in the first round, which hopefully they have one of the last picks for their sake, but they can get a nice wide receiver there as well. But I think Ruiz, while maybe a tiny bit of a reach, he was definitely the best center in the draft class. It wasn't a very good interior offensive line draft, so maybe in another he'd be more of a second round pick. But in this draft, I'm fine with them taking him here. I think them moving him to right guard, I think he's actually going to do really well. I like him. I liked him more than a lot of other people did. I think he's still a first round caliber talent, in my opinion.
Yeah, I definitely expected him to go in the first round. I just didn't think the Saints were like the place for him to go. I think the Saints could have drafted a guy like Justin Jefferson. I know many people wanted him. Even a linebacker like Kenneth Murray. I know many people were mocking him to go there. So there was definitely,
Yeah.
I think there was definitely more obvious picks. But like you said, what do you draft for a team that has no holes? Yeah, it's just a luxury pick for them.
Yeah, right. It 100% is. Demario Davis is an extremely talented linebacker too. You got to factor he's still there, and they added Zach Bond as well. So and Kiko Alonso, Alex Anzalone, that's a good linebacking core. So I mean, they could have used a guy like Kenneth Murray because he's just such a great linebacker, and I think he's going to be an absolute beast. But they do have a very good linebacking room, which I think their biggest concern would have been that number two corner position. But they did sign Janoris Jenkins, which is not on the document, but they did sign him in the offseason as well, which he's kind of trash now, but he's better than PJ Williams, and that's all that really matters. I think they're so do you think the Saints have the potential to win the Super Bowl this year?
If they can beat the Chiefs, yes, I think they have the opportunity to win the Super Bowl, and we'll get to see that because the Saints and Chiefs actually play each other down the stretch of the season. So we'll know right then and there, who has the edge and what that game looks like and who can improve on that game. Uh, the Chiefs are the team to beat in the AFC, and if the Saints are going to make it to the Super Bowl, they're going to have to go through them.
Yeah, I could see it as well. I think they're going to compete. They're going to be one of the top four teams in the league and a favorite to actually make it to the Super Bowl. But yeah, I don't. I'm excited for that Saints Chiefs game. I think that's one of the bigger games of the year. I'm really excited to see when it's going to be very similar to the Chiefs Rams game from a couple years ago. Remember that high flying attack? I think this is going to be a very similar game. I think it's going to be both teams are putting up at least 45 points in that game because
Yeah,
I mean while both defenses are good, I don't think they're going to be good in that game. Personally, I think both defenses are going to really struggle, and I think this is going to be a very fun just aerial assault from both teams. And if you have any of them in fantasy, I don't really care who it is you're playing them in that week. Which that's going to be one to look forward to for sure on the schedule.
yeah, it's definitely a game that we all thought could have been a Super Bowl matchup in the past couple of years, but I think this year is a good chance we can see them in down the stretch.
Yeah, I definitely do as well. Let's get into our fantasy predictions for this team. I'll go ahead and go first this time. There's a lot of talent on the top end. It's kind of there's not really any really interesting names for me to talk about. So I guess I'll just go into Alvin Kamara just because he had kind of a down year last year, and people are probably really kind of scared off because of that because he only had a few touchdowns last year. I don't think there's anything to be concerned about. I think you can draft him as a top 6 pick. As we just went over recently in our fantasy running back rankings, he was in I believe he was my number 5 guy or number 4, if I'm not mistaken. But I think he has a very good chance of bouncing back. If you got him in a PPR league, you're going to be extremely happy with the amount of targets he gets. He's had 81 receptions over each of the last couple of seasons. So I think he's due to get around that again this year. They do have a little bit of vacated targets as well. So I'm kind of excited to see if he can take over because Ted Ginn, not a great player, but he did take up a little bit of targets, so that's a guy that could benefit from that. But I think Kamara can be drafted as, like I said, a top 5 running back no matter what format you're in, and I think he's going to deliver on an excellent season.
I just want to add to that real quick and say that normally in a draft, the first 3 picks are going to go Christian McCaffrey, Barkley, and Elliott, obviously. And then if you're at the 4th pick, you're going to have a choice between Kamara or Michael Thomas. And 10 times out of 10, I will be choosing Kamara. I need a running back. He's going to have a bounce back year. Yeah, always take Kamara if you have that choice. He'll go in the top 4. He should go in the top 4 in every draft.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more on the Kamara talk there. Why don't you get into your name?
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Drew Brees, and considering where he's gonna be drafted in, now he's not being drafted as one of the top, 7, 8 quarterbacks. So you're definitely gonna get a steal on him. Definitely, in the eighth, ninth, 10th round if you can, around where Ryan and Stafford and Wentz are going. Um, he's definitely not going like I said as a top 7, and he'll probably maybe finish as a top 10 quarterback of the year. And like a high flying offense, you're definitely gonna want a piece of that. Uh, he could regress a little bit, knowing it could be his last season. But like I said before, if it is his last season, he's definitely going to go all out and perform. So I think Breeze would be another solid pick in the mid rounds.
Yeah, I'm also fine with Brees as my quarterback. I'm in a 10-team league in my home league, so this is a guy I'm definitely going to be targeting to draft because if you're in a home league, you do have to go a little bit earlier at the quarterback position. I'm still going very late, but with 10 teams, people are going to be trying to get that second quarterback around the Drew Brees range, and this is a guy that I'm definitely going to target. Him, Wentz, Brady, those are all options that I'm very interested in this year, and even Matt Ryan as well. There's a lot of quarterbacks in this division that they're kind of all the same to me. Matt Ryan, Tom Brady, Drew Brees. These are all quarterbacks that I'd be willing to rely on. I'm gonna go ahead and just bring it up right now instead of waiting for Brady to come up. What would be your favorite quarterback out of those three? Matt Ryan, Drew Brees, Tom Brady. Which one would you draft first?
It's definitely it's a tough one. I think like you said, all three of them are gonna be at the same spot, and then you gotta make that choice. I think I'll have to lean a little bit towards Breeze, not just only because we know what we can do, and I think even though Brady definitely has an opportunity to be the best quarterback in the division or in the conference, we haven't seen it yet. I'm definitely going to regret not drafting Brady if I don't get the opportunity to, but though all three of them will be fantasy viable, honestly.
Yeah, I agree with the fact that I think they're all going to be really solid. I think they're all going to be in the top 12. For me, I'll rank them as actually think Matt Ryan's my number one. I'm willing to take this shot on Matt Ryan. He throws for more. Drew Brees has had struggled just getting over like 4,000 yards now in his career. I mean, I know he had injuries last year, so it was tough for him to get under it, but he really falters at that back half of the year. I think Matt Ryan showed that he was actually better over the last part of the season. He was really solid after he had the injury, but then the last few weeks of the season he was really solid. So I think I'm going to go Matt Ryan one, and then I'll go with Drew Brees, and then while Tom Brady is my number three, I'm also very willing to take him as well. So all three I'm interested in on the in this division, and even Bridgewater to some extent, which we'll get into him a little bit. I'm not super interested in him as my quarterback one, but that's definitely a name to look out for in the fantasy world. Um, let's go into the next team here. It's the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, 7-9 last year, very similar season to the Falcons, except for the fact they were more consistent, basically just win loss, basically throughout the whole year. Adding Tom Brady obviously makes this the most interesting team in the division, and I'm really excited to talk about them. Brady, huge addition from obviously the New England Patriots. One of the GOAT of quarterbacks, maybe not anymore, but he's still a top half of the league quarterback. In no matter what you think of him, he's well above that in my opinion. They also added the former retired tight end Rob Gronkowski as well from the Patriots in a trade. So another guy to be really interested about. And they actually just picked up Shady McCoy. So some running back depth there. On the defense or on the losses, they didn't really lose a whole lot to me. Winston, losing him, they got Brady, so it doesn't matter. Peyton Barber's trash. Perryman, they don't really need him. Mar Dotson is was probably the biggest loss. He's a pretty decent offensive tackle. Bo Allen and Carl Nassib were just kind of role players. Nothing really that big there. But while losing Dotson, they added at the 13th pick, they added Tristan Wirfs from Iowa, in my opinion, actually the best offensive lineman in this entire class. I thought he was going to go he fell a little bit. I thought he was actually going to be the first offensive lineman off the board. Antoine Winfield Sr. also going to help out in the back end. And then Keyshawn Vaughn, Tyler Johnson, also pretty nice additions there. I think they had a very good offseason this year. They didn't really lose a lot. I think they added a lot, but I still think this defense is really going to be the downfall of this team. I'm not as high on them. I know some people are like, oh, they're Super Bowl contenders. I am not willing to go there at all, especially in this division. I think the Saints are clearly better, and the Falcons are right there with them as well in terms of basically being I see them as about the same as the Bucs. I think the Bucs are going to struggle this year to get to 10 wins. I think they're going to be a good team, definitely an above average team, but I think in this division they're going to struggle. I don't know how you feel about them.
I think the defense is actually not as bad as you make it out to be. I think the addition of Devin White a year ago definitely helped that defense out, and then the new additions this season. I think I think you're giving them less credit than they deserve. I think the offense and defense are both going to be on point. The offense was already kind of rolling, even with Winston, and you just plug in Brady. If you limit the interceptions, I think this offense will be a top 10 in the league. And then you just need the defense to be average at best, and I think you have a playoff team for sure in this team.
Yeah, on the defense, let me kind of rephrase what I was saying. The front seven it's an elite unit. Sue, Vita Vea, William Golson, Jason Pierre-Paul, and then Devin White, Levante David, Shaquille Barrett. That is an excellent unit. Their front seven is one of the best in the league, and they're going to be really good again. They stopped the run well last year, but their problem is absolutely trash secondary. It was the worst secondary objectively last year in the league. I believe they were 32nd in or first in passing yards allowed, if you want to say they allowed the most. And they got Carlton Davis, Mike Edwards, Justin Evans, and Sean Murphy Bunting. And honestly, I only know Murphy Bunting, and I don't know anybody else in that entire secondary personally. I mean, Winfield they obviously added, but he's a rookie. I'm not really going to rely on him for a lot of production. I think they're going to get absolutely torched in the secondary this year, and that is my big concern with them. It was the same concern last year. They were always in shootouts, and I mean Winston turned the ball over a lot, so he was kind of putting their defense on their backs a lot more than Brady will. But I think the offense is going to regress a tiny bit with Brady. I think they're going to be better in terms of not turning the ball over as much, but in terms of total yards, I think they're going to go down a little bit because I think Brady is not as good as he used to be. But he does have Chris Godwin and Mike Evans. You can't forget about that. Two of the probably the second best duo in the league after Julio and Calvin Ridley, in my opinion, but a very close second because I think Godwin is better than Ridley, but I also think Julio is better than both of them. So kind of how I feel about that. But I think Brady, while being really good this year, I don't think he's going to throw for quite as many yards as Jameis does. And maybe Jameis did more as a product of him just throwing so many interceptions and needing to come back. So there might be kind of a give take there. But I think I still think this defense is going to get absolutely torched in the secondary. Personally, their front seven should help a little bit, but there's only so much you can hide with that secondary when they just really don't have any super talented players, and I'm not going to rely on a rookie in Antoine Winfield, and not a guy that I was insanely high on, but I think he's a good player. I don't know. I'm just kind of out on that secondary.
I think when you talked about them being in shootouts last season, I think that, like you said, also a product of all the pick sixes and all the picks Jameis
Yeah,
was throwing and playing from behind most of the game. I still think that they'll have a lot of shootouts this season, but I feel like Tom Brady will be more of a game manager than Winston was. He won't rush a
yeah, he
throw.
will be.
He'll find the windows, and if you can limit the pick sixes, I think you'd win those games more times than not. That's definitely what would have happened last season. If Winston didn't have so many pick sixes, they would have won most of the games, I feel like. So the fact that they have Brady, he's going to have a lot more weapons than he's had in a very long time. We can't forget the tight end room. I know Gronkowski, he's definitely not going to be the Gronk that we saw him as a few seasons ago. He'll definitely have to work to where he was. But you also have OJ Howard and Cameron Brate. And even though OJ Howard isn't great fantasy wise, he can definitely make some plays when you give him the opportunity. So a big tight end room, a lot of good wide receivers. I think Tom Brady will have to throw the ball deep a little bit more. I know he liked to check down so many times last season. He'll definitely have some good weapons in Godwin and Evans, so he'll need to stretch the ball down the field a lot more. Maybe get hurt for that a little bit, but you have to take your shots. And if you're smarter than what Winston was last season, I think this offense will
Yeah.
win shootouts 10 times out of 10.
Yeah, that's a good point there. An interesting battle on the offense I'm excited to talk about is kind of that running back room. Without Peyton Barber, who was absolutely crap. I think he's one of the worst running backs in the entire league. I think he's horrible. But they added Keyshawn Vaughn. They just signed LaShawn McCoy. They also have Ronald Jones. Who do you think is going to emerge as the starter in this backfield?
Well, if you asked me a couple days ago, I would have said Ronald Jones for sure. They had Keyshawn Vaughn, and we talked about this in our draft. Uh, Rojo is a draftable player. He's not going to want Keyshawn Vaughn to take his spot. Vaughn was recently just put on the COVID list, so that will probably hurt him a lot, as well as rookies just not getting the opportunity to vibe with the offense as much. Rojo has been here before. I think he is the number one. That being said, the Sean McCoy signing definitely hurt him a little bit. We saw McCoy in Kansas City. He hurt Williams' value a lot. And I don't think that you can rely on either one of them to, contribute fantasy wise weekly. I think you have to guess which one will be who. And I think McCoy is going to take a lot of that work. And I really want to draft Rojo, but I don't know if I can anymore. I'll probably avoid him now.
Yeah, I'm still all right with Rojo. I wasn't insanely high on him. He's kind of more of like a flex option for me in fantasy. I think he will win the job, but it's not going to be. I think it's going to be more of like he's going to get like 60% of the work. I think Vaughn's going to get like 35 and some decent passing work. No, maybe more like 55 ish, and then Shady's going to get too many touches for me. I think McCoy is very washed personally. I don't think he really has much left, but he showed that they're still willing to give him the ball. I mean, Andy Reid was willing to give him well over 50 carries last year. I think he was more towards the 100 mark in terms of carries, and that's just you shouldn't be giving 100 carries to a guy that just can't get it done anymore. And he proved he can't for the Chiefs last year. He was really not good last year. So I think Shady's going to get too many. He's going to be annoying because he's going to get too many carries, and you're going to be losing out on carries for both more talented guys. I think Ronald Jones has a lot of talent. I also think Vaughn. Well, I'm not insanely high on him. I also think he has a decent amount of talent and some juice in the passing game as well. So I think he deserves his shot to get at least 150 touches this year, but he probably will not now that McCoy's there.
Yeah, the background is too crowded to determine a number one right now. I think, like you said, I think McCoy's going to get a little bit too much work to the point where he'll cancel out what Rojo can do or what Vaughn can do, and I'm just going to avoid him from now on.
Yeah, that's not a bold take there at all from you. Well, I'd say we get into our fantasy selections right now. Go ahead, Roman.
I'm going to go with Chris Godwin. He definitely broke out last season, and he's not one of the top wide receivers taken off the board. He's more like the fifth or sixth. You can get him in the late second round, early third round, which is definitely a good spot. If you get your two running backs and then take Godwin, I think you're all set to go.
Yeah.
He's arguably the number one on the team. I know Mike Evans didn't really shine as much when Godwin was having his moments. So you're going to be paying a lot to get Godwin from what he was doing last season, but I definitely think he can reproduce what he did.
Yeah, I agree. I think Godwin is getting slept on a little bit. Actually, he's kind of fallen in drafts as it's gone on. He was kind of in the early to mid second round. Now he's kind of fallen back to the late second to early third. And I think it's a product of a couple players. Like Miles Sanders still has the backfield to himself, and you got Clyde Edwards-Helaire emerging. So those are a couple names that kind of pushed him back to the end of the second. That's kind of how I see it. So he's more of a value now where he is. I was a little bit concerned about drafting him in the early to mid second, but now at the end of the second, early third, you can kind of go Christian McCaffrey maybe, and then try maybe Godwin's still there in the second. Then you can grab like an Aaron Jones or another pretty good running back. Maybe even if Todd Gurley's there, I don't know if I would go that early for him, but definitely in the third round at some point I would take him. So that would be a very good start, a very good foundation to your team, getting a number one receiver as well as two really good running backs. So I like Godwin this year a lot. The guy I want to bring up is a guy I don't really want to talk about. I was going to do Ronald Jones. We kind of already touched on what we think about him. It's Rob Gronkowski for me. I think I am absolutely avoiding him in drafts in any regard. I will not be drafting him this year. Someone's going to overdraft him in your home league. I know in the expert leagues, they kind of have his ADP down in the double digits. Guys aren't taking him. But someone's going to see Rob Gronkowski's back and just go, oh, my goodness, I need to take him. He's the best tight end in the league. He's going to go earlier in drafts than you're gonna think he is. I would not be surprised if someone took him in the middle rounds, right around maybe the Darren Waller range, or even a guy like Austin Hooper's probably even a little bit late, going to go even later than Gronk, or a guy like Hayden Hurst. There are so many tight ends that I would rather have over Gronkowski. I think he will struggle to finish inside the top 15, maybe even top 20 in terms of tight ends. And it's a guy I'm absolutely out on. There's a lot of weapons on this team. He was retired for a full year. He's a lot skinnier now, which might be good for his speed, but I don't think it's going to be good for his injury case because he has had so many problems with injury. He hasn't played a full season in 2011. I think that is I think he's just a very risky tight end. I know you're maybe taking him late if you're in a smart league, but he's really not the guy I want to take my shot on. I don't think he has that much upside. I mean, he could catch some touchdown passes here, and then he's going to be very touchdown dependent, but I think the yards just aren't going to be there with the weapons like Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. I don't know how you feel about Gronk, but that's kind of my rant on him there for a second.
Yeah, I think you hit it home for the most part. There's definitely a name value to him, and like you said, he'll definitely go around where Waller, maybe Ernst, and around that spot, maybe like
that's kind of what I see.
Sixth round. I am not necessarily out on Gronkowski. I'm just gonna. I prefer other players. Obviously, he goes kind of where Gesicki and then Hurst and Henry kind of go. The only conditions I'll take Gronk on is if he's an absolute steal. He'll need to
Yeah.
go. He'll need to go like maybe 5 or 6 rounds later than his ADP for me to actually consider him. And even then,
Me
if
too.
he's yeah, and even then, if he's there with Hawkinson and Gesicki, that'll still be a hard decision for me. It's definitely not a guy that you're actively going to target. If he happens to fall in your lap in the 10th, 11th, 12th rounds, I wouldn't be upset taking him honestly. But
Yeah,
obviously,
that's
there's
positive.
definitely other guys you should be targeting. He shouldn't be your top guy going into it.
No, and I think if he does fall to that point, I think the real value in taking him is that name value. But the problem is if he's fallen that far, that means no one's really interested in him. But if he does, it's kind of tough. So if you kind of draft him and then maybe he has a touchdown in week one, people are like, oh, the old Gronk's back, man. Then you could trade him for maybe a little bit more value. But I'm really not interested in drafting a player just to trade him personally. I don't know how you feel about that, but I'm not really. That's not really how I play fantasy football. I want to get the players that I want to keep around, or guys that I want to cut right away, not guys that I'm trying to hold on to for a trade or something. I also don't really like going with a second tight end, so I'm going to be drafting mine late and just having the one. But I would be much more willing to take a guy that's probably going to go behind him in Hayden Hurst, and maybe even a guy that we're probably not going to touch up on a lot, but on the Panthers, Ian Thomas. There's a lot of vacated targets there. A guy that I might be interested in as well with Teddy Bridgewater. So on that note, we're just going to jump right into the Panthers
I
and
kind
just
of want to. Can I bring something up real quick? Sorry about that.
go ahead.
I don't think it's necessarily a bad idea to take Gronk and then if he goes out week one, then trade him. I think even if you cut him, he'll be picked up right away just because of the name value. So you either can pick him up late and see if he performs. You'll know early on what he can do or what they're planning on doing with him. So you either draft him really late and then trade him for maybe what fill a hole on your team, or you just you draft him and then drop him in the first couple of weeks. Those are the only really two options you can do with him.
Yeah, I agree with that. Just not a lot of upside there for Gronk, in my opinion. But on that note, let's go back into the Panthers. This is a team that, while I think they're going to be absolutely terrible this year and win very low amount of games, they're going to be fun to watch with this offense. And it kind of starts with the quarterback position. It's Teddy Bridgewater for me. He's very talented. I think he's very talented. I'm not calling him in any stretch of the elite quarterback, but he's a proven winner in my opinion. When he stepped in for the Saints, I think he had a lot of success last year as a game manager, and I think he can be unleashed more than a game manager this year that I would like to talk about after this. They also added Russell Okung, the veteran tackle, Robbie Anderson, the talented wide receiver, Seth Roberts, Eli Apple, the trash corner, as we already talked about today, and Tyre Whitehead, he's also a pretty talented linebacker. Now go into their losses. They got a lot of them. Cam Newton to New England, obviously a big loss there. Uh, Greg Olson as well, another the big loss at tight end. He's been a long time Panther and a very talented one at that. Trey Turner, the Chargers, which is a big move for them. Mario Addison, Bruce Irvin, Don Terry Poe, Vernon Butler, Lou Kuechly to retirement, which is also big. James Bradbury, Eric Reed, and Gerald McCoy. And I would argue that all those players are above average. So, man, you just think about how much they've lost on defense. It is insane, man. This defense is going to be terrible this year. And while they did go very, very defensive heavy in the draft with Derek Brown, Gross Matos, Chin, Pride, Robinson, Roy, and Thomas Oliver, all defensive players, 3 corners, safety, and 3 D linemen. So they basically just went all in on the defense. But you think you adding a ton of rookies is not going to make a trash defense good. I think they're going to really struggle this year. I think this is going to be the worst defense in football. I don't know how you feel about them, but that's my opinion.
Yeah, I think they lost a lot, and they definitely tried their best to make it up. I think, like when you were mentioning the adds and subtractions, you forgot to mention they added their coaching staff. Matt Rule, a college
Yes.
coach, Joe Brady, a college coach. That'll definitely contribute to the offensive side. Defense, I think they got a lot of good players. Derek Brown at 7. People were thinking he'd go in the top 4 picks of the draft. Gross Matos, definitely a guy I would have liked the Lions to draft.
Yep.
Definitely fits in their scheme. But yeah, they definitely went. They went all defense. They'll probably make a difference later down the line, not in their first year, but I think once all of them, get 1 year under their belt, a couple years under their belt, it could be pretty dangerous. But not now.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree as well. I mean, they still have very talented Brian Burns on the in the linebacker room. It's probably why they didn't go with any linebackers. He's an excellent linebacker and a guy that just continues to develop in his talents. That's probably going to be their best defensive player, but it's really not going to matter with how bad I think the rest of their defense is. I mean, they filled some holes, but they're definitely still going to have to start some kind of crappy veterans and players that were already on the roster. And I'm really not interested in the Panthers defense this year. I think they're also not going to be very interested in playing defense as well because I think they're going to really struggle, especially in the secondary. I think the secondary is going to be one of the worst in football. I think the Bucks and the Panthers. I know we're not getting to our fantasy pick yet, but I think these are two teams you are basically starting any receiver that has legs against these two teams because they are going to get torched in the secondary. Both these might be the two worst secondaries in football. But I'm kind of I feel like we're good on the defense. So what I'm really interested in on this team is I think this offense is going to be very high flying. I mean, you look at their weapons around Bridgewater, who's a pretty solid quarterback. I know he's been a game manager his whole career, but I don't think he's had weapons like this. I actually really like these weapons. So he's obviously got Christian McCaffrey, one of the best, if not the best running back in the league. Going to be awesome again this year. There's no exception to that. He's just dynamic, and he got the bag for a good reason. He's a great player. They also they have the rising star DJ Moore, who I think is actually one of the better receivers in this league. I think he is very underrated at this point in his career, and I think after the monster season he had last year, I know he really struggled in the touchdown department. He was just such a target machine, even through an injury. I think he had well over 1,100 yards. I think he's due for a huge season this year. Robbie Anderson as well. I know he's basically just been a one-trick pony at New York, just a deep threat, but they just used him wrong. I think Robbie Anderson is more of a complete receiver than that. And then don't forget about Curtis Samuel, another guy that has a lot of talent. I know they were trying to kind of shop him early in the season, but I think he's still got, now that he's on the roster, I think he's still got a lot of juice, and I think they're going to use him like they've been using him lately with the end arounds, the deep threats. And then they also have Ian Thomas, which I kind of previously mentioned him. I think he's an underrated tight end as well. I think he's got some talent. He's proven when he's had the starting role when Greg Olsen goes down with an injury that he can do a little bit, and he's a pretty good receiving tight end. I know not a great blocker, but I think he has a little bit of talent. So what offensive weapon most really excites you going into this year, besides McCaffrey at least?
Definitely DJ Moore. I think he's definitely the clear number one. He didn't necessarily break out last season, but he'll definitely break out this season. I know in the drafts last season, Moore and Curtis Samuel were going like right next to each other, and you really you had to decide which one to take. I unfortunately took Curtis Samuel over Moore. Didn't really make a difference, so I ended up cutting him a few weeks into the season. But now it's clear cut. He's definitely number one, and I think the Robbie Anderson pickup, I don't think that was necessarily a pickup they had to make. That was never really a need for them. I definitely think he'll definitely contribute, and he'll have more success than he did in New York. I kind of want to also bring up a hot take. I don't know if this is against the grain here, but Teddy Bridgewater obviously is a good quarterback, and he definitely deserved the money he deserved. He signed with. He should have been the franchise in Minnesota. Unfortunately, he was plagued with injuries, and they went in a different direction. I feel like the Panthers may have overpaid him just a little bit, and I don't really think anything is going to come out of the contract. I think Bridgewater is a good quarterback, just not maybe that kind of money wise. And I think they're paying for the performance last season, that 5 stretch of games they had with the Saints. I think the Saints knew how to use him, and they had the confidence in him. I don't know how he'll do in a whole season stretch of games. I just don't really. I'm not really excited to see like what he can do. Like I said, he definitely deserves the money, and he's a good quarterback, and for what he's been through, I think he deserves this to be a starter once again. I just don't think he'll be able to put it into action. I don't know if you can agree with that.
I do I kind of see where you're coming. Maybe a little bit of an overpay there. I know he's had a lot of tough luck with injuries. I just really like Teddy Bridgewater, man. I feel like he's just a guy you can't dislike because he's had tough injuries. He seems like a really good dude. I think he's a really smart quarterback, and he's one of the smarter quarterbacks in the league. And he reminds me of like a more. I mean, I know he's still in the league, but like a Chiefs. I think he's going to play a very similar role to the Chiefs version of Alex Smith. I think that's kind of his ceiling this year. I think while not winning very many games, I know it's not going to matter what he really does on the field because of how bad that defense is going to be. It really doesn't. He could be Patrick Mahomes this year, and they wouldn't win that many games. But I think he's going to play very similarly to Alex Smith did with the Chiefs. A lot of weapons around him. I think Smith was an above average quarterback. I think Bridgewater, in terms of just a pure quarterback standpoint, I think he's average to above average at least in terms of starters. So I do like him a little bit more than what you're saying, but I also see where you're coming from.
You also have to give props where props is due. He definitely he stood in there in New Orleans and won games with the Saints with Bridgewater out. So that's definitely something that's very commendable. I just think that, like you said, he's definitely you can't hate him, but at the same time, this isn't the first time we've seen a quarterback get paid, get a huge bag for a performance that they had the season prior, and then do absolutely nothing the year after. We saw it with Foles. I predict that that's going to happen with Tannehill. I don't think he'll live up to the contract at all. And I think Bridgewater might be on that same boat. And if worst comes to worst, you have a bad season, you can always take Lawrence or Fields the year after. Like, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, and this is going to be a team that's definitely going to compete for that first overall pick. I think they're projected to be one of the 3 worst teams in the entire league, but they're going to be more fun than some of these other crappy teams in the league. I really do believe it. I think this offense is going to be very fun to watch. I'm really excited to see what Bridgewater can do with these weapons, including Christian McCaffrey and DJ Moore, obviously, 2 of the better skill position players at their respective positions. So I guess I have a little bit more excitement for him than you do. It sounds like you like him as a player, but I think we both agree that he's not a good enough quarterback to carry this team. While they might have a good offense, he might have a good statistical season, he's not going to carry them to a bunch of wins through this crappy defense. So I think we're both in agreement. I think it takes the right system with a good defense for him to like it would have. I think the Saints would have been fine with him if Brees just didn't even come back. I think they still would have been a very good last year, and he was having a good time winning games. This is a different story for me. I think he's going to put up a little bit better stats here and have a much worse winning percentage.
I don't think he's gonna. I don't think he's gonna light it up as much as we kind of think.
Maybe not light it up, but I think he's a 4,000-yard passer this year for sure. I think with the weapons he's got around him, I think there's no way he doesn't hit that mark.
Yeah, he'll need to have a good season in order to help more live up to the value of where he's drafted at. We're drafting him to have a good season, and Bridgewater has to contribute to that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, so we don't really have anything else to talk about with this team. Just we got all the rookies on defense. There's really not much there to talk about besides maybe their linebacking core being all right, and Brian Burns, Shaq Thompson, Tahir Whitehead. Not a terrible unit, but the rest of the defense is going to be horrendously bad. So let's go ahead and get into a fantasy pick. I'll start this one off since you went with the Bucs first. I'm going with DJ Moore, man. I think I am projected to be a well inside my top 10 receivers. I think I have him at the number 8 position. I really like DJ Moore this year, man. You're getting him in like the 3rd, 4th round, maybe even the 5th if you're playing a home league that really doesn't even know who he is yet. Because I think I agree with what you said earlier that he hasn't fully broken out yet. This is the year where he does. I am absolutely projecting a breakout for him. I think he's going to get well over 1,300 yards and 6 or 7 touchdowns. He had such trouble getting in the end zone last year, but I think him and Bridgewater are going to become best friends. He's the ideal receiver for Bridgewater to have, a guy that's great underneath, but can take like a slant to the house at any moment because he's very good after the catch. So this is a guy that's going to thrive in the Bridgewater system. And Robbie Anderson and Curtis Samuel might do all right as well, but they're more of the deep threats. And Bridgewater, he hasn't really proven that he likes to take a lot of shots down the field. DJ Moore is not a guy that runs a ton of 9 routes. He's going to be more in that slant, drag, maybe even some posts every once in a while when he goes deep. But he's going to be, and curls as well. He's going to be that guy that hits that intermediate route and just absolutely runs with it. He's going to get a ton of targets, ton of receptions. I really, really like him this year. I don't know how you feel about Moore, but I am all in on Moore.
Yeah, I'll be actively targeting him as my wide receiver 1. I definitely think he'll have a good season under this offense.
Yeah, and kind of like we were talking about earlier with Calvin Ridley, this is another guy. I mean, you have to take him before Ridley for sure, but a guy that you can get like in that 4th round that is absolutely should be your wide receiver 1. I honestly like if he's still on the board, and I think he will be in my home league. That's kind of what I'm projecting. He will be on the board for me in the 4th round. I'm going running back, and then taking him as my wide receiver 1, and then maybe going Chark with round 5. That's kind of my draft strategy right now because I really like DJ Moore this year, and like I said before, the mid rounds right now, the 4th through 6th round are absolutely dynamic for receivers. There's probably 12 receivers in that group that I absolutely would love to have as either wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2.
Yeah.
Go into your take right now.
Besides McCaffrey, I think that's the obvious choice. He's the running back one. I'm not going to pick him for my pick though. I'm actually going to go with Teddy Bridgewater, and I think he's definitely a pick that could pan out in a 12 team, maybe a 14 team league. I definitely don't suggest drafting him in a 10 team league. There's definitely more than enough quarterbacks to go around in that kind of league. But if you're going to either stream a quarterback or pick one absolutely late in a 12 team league, I think Bridgewater is definitely going to be there every time. He goes around the spot, where Daniel Jones, Drew Lock, Joe Burrow. And I think if you want to stream a quarterback and have a quarterback that has guaranteed offensive weapons, I definitely think Bridgewater is a good pick. He's definitely not going to, in fantasy terms, you're not going to get like 20 to 25, 20, 30 points a week, but he'll give you close to 20, and that'll be just good enough for, your team. And uh, I don't want to hate on him. That's definitely not my intention. I like him as a person. I think he's a good player.
Yeah.
The contract doesn't match the skill set, but in terms of fantasy, uh, I would be fine with drafting him only in like 12 or 14 team leagues.
Yeah, and that's interesting for sure. Bridgewater, I think he has the possibility to finish as a top 12 quarterback. I'm not projecting it, but I think he's in my rankings. I think I have him at 17 or 18. So a guy that you can definitely rely on as like a streaming option and a really good matchup. When they're playing the Bucks, I will absolutely be playing him in that game because he's going to torch that secondary. But I'll be playing pretty much anybody against the Bucks at this point. On Bridgewater, I love him when you're playing in a super flex league. Bridgewater would absolutely be one of my top choices as a number two quarterback because he's getting really slept on. So this is a perfect guy for even a dynasty startup. If you're playing in a super flex, you take Bridgewater as your quarterback too, and you kind of just forget about it because while he's not that super flashy guy, I think he's very safe and a guy that's going to give you points from week in and week out. And his job is, as of right now, as long as he doesn't stink this year, I think his job is pretty secure. I know they may draft a quarterback next year, which if they do that would stink, but because they're going to be bad, so it kind of stinks how it's going to work out. He might get screwed out of another starting job. Bridgewater, for now at least, though, is a guy that I absolutely want to target in those super flex leagues. So that's literally my favorite target is my quarterback too.
I kind of want to bring up a player, definitely not for fantasy purpose. This is just kind of off the map a little bit. What are your thoughts on PJ Walker? I think he could be maybe use the Taysom Hill role. Definitely shut out in the XFL, the best quarterback in the XFL. And
Yeah, sure.
what do you think he'll have like a role other than being a backup?
I don't really. While I do like PJ Walker the player, and if Bridgewater was to go down with an injury, I think Walker is the one that's. I know they still have Will Greer. He proved that he can't play football. He's not very good, but I think PJ Walker would be the guy that steps into that starting role, and I think he would do pretty well with it. Actually, for fantasy, I think he might even be better than Teddy Bridgewater because he can run. But in the offense, maybe a snap here and there, but I don't think they will be playing him in the Taysom Hill role. He's not. I don't think he has that same kind of versatility. I think he's more of the quarterback that's mobile rather than the just player that can do everything. I guess if that makes sense to you. I think Walker is more of he can do stuff at the quarterback position that Bridgewater can't, but really can't move to other positions the way that Taysom Hill can.
Yeah, he definitely attracted a lot of attention in the XFL, and I wouldn't be
He sure
surprised
did.
if he got a little bit more in the offense. Many people want to see him in the NFL.
Yeah, that's definitely fair. I would say it's in the realm of possibility. I'm not projecting him to really do a whole lot, at least this year.
Right.
Maybe next year I could see it a little bit more, him getting more of a role if they do like what they see in him this year. But other than that, not
Yeah.
really insanely hyped about him. But
Just an interesting player. I just want to get your thoughts on it.
yeah, it definitely is a very interesting player, and it's a very interesting signing for this team. A guy that could end up having an impact down the road. But to kind of cap this episode off, why don't we go through our records? We'll start. I'm going to start at the top for mine. The Saints. I'm going to go ahead and say 12-4 for them. I think they're going to be a really good team. Not even really take a step back. It's 12-4, 13-3, basically the same record. So I think they're going to do really well. And I'm actually going to go with the Falcons, my number two team. I think they're going to win 9 games. I think they're going to sneak into that wild card spot. And I also think the Bucks are going to win 9 games as well. But I think the Falcons will beat them both times. That's my projection right now. And they will not make the playoffs. I think they will be the first team out of the playoffs. I think the NFC is so stacked. It's going to be tough for 3 teams from this whole division to get in. And the Falcons are the team I'm going to project to get in. The Buccaneers are my first team out, basically, from the playoffs. And then the Panthers, I'm going 2-14. I think they're going to be terrible. I think they're getting the first pick.
That's interesting. I think Jacksonville is maybe a little bit more
Yeah, they're
worse
also
than them.
terrible. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
basically pick your poison between those two teams. I think they're the two worst teams in football.
Yeah. So my rankings, I'm gonna go New Orleans at 13-3. I think they'll be the 1 seed in the division, Super Bowl favorite from that conference at least. Tampa Bay, I'll have them second at 10-6. They'll make the playoffs as a wild card. They'll probably sneak in as a 7 seed. You had Atlanta. I'll have Tampa Bay,
Yeah.
and then Atlanta comes in, 9-7, 10-6. I wouldn't be surprised either one of that, or 8-8. It just depends on what Matt Ryan we see and how the defense holds up. And then obviously Panthers are last. I don't think they'll have that worse of a season. I'll have a hard time believing they'll actually win less than 3 games. So I'll go 5-11 again.
Oh wow, yeah, that's interesting. I mean, last year they did start off. I believe they start off 4-1 or something like that. They were doing pretty solid before really running into a buzzsaw there at the end of the year and losing.
Yeah, you have to remember that they had Kyle Allen and Will Greer starting at the end of the season, and I'd rather have Bridgewater over both of them. So
yeah, they lost so much loss on the defense. That's I don't see it. I could see them winning 5 games. Maybe I was a little low by saying 2. I'll go ahead and say 4-12. I'll move it up a little. They're not that bad.
Yeah, I definitely don't think they're the worst team in the league by far. I think there's plenty of teams worse than them. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. If we don't have anything else, that'll wrap up this episode of the Zone Defense Podcast. Again, be sure to follow us on Twitter at Zone Defense Pod, Spotify at Zone Defense Podcast, and then subscribe to our YouTube channel at Zone Defense Podcast. We're gonna start putting some more polls on Twitter and stuff, some more interactive stuff. So be sure to vote on that. Be sure to try to comment if you disagree with any opinions on there. But yeah, that's gonna do it for this episode. Like we said again, Roman, thank you for joining the show, and it was a pleasure doing this with you. I'm sure we're gonna have a few more within the coming weeks with Drew being on vacation.
Yes, I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
All right, man. That's gonna wrap it up for us again. We'll see you next time. Peace.